You ever play Whiplash? It was developed by Crystal Dynamics, the madmen behind everyone's favorite quip-spittin' gecko Gex. They did pretty well for themselves back in the 5th gen. Hell, they were even the first non-Japanese developer for the PlayStation. Come 1996, however, they were faced with a slew of financial problems, with none other than Eidos stepping in to bail them out. And thank God they did, because it was after this they'd go on to make games like Soul Reaver and even save Tomb Raider from the grave core design had left it in. But it was also during this time they'd throw out a few oddities, with the 6th gen ushering along its very own. This here is Mad Dash Racing, which was a whole-ass launch title for the original Xbox. It's essentially Crystal Dynamics' take on games like Sonic R and Running Wild with a cast of wacky animal characters. But the main reason I'm bringing it up is thanks to this guy's Spanx. While he would debut in this ill-fated, poorly received piece of a game shelf decoration, it wouldn't be the last time he'd weasel his ass into a Crystal Dynamics game, as just a little over 2 years later, he'd take on the starring role in Whiplash. This here 3D platformer was rather polarizing back in 2003, what with its premise focusing around the topic of animal abuse. But have no fear, for the people for the ethical treatment of animals swooped in to say, it's okay, we like it either way! You might think it a bit odd that PETA not only approved of, but endorsed a game wherein you end animal abuse by abusing animals, but that's pretty accurate to how they operate. Since I don't want to open that can of worms, however, I'll keep my mouth shut. I'd hate to mention how they euthanize record amounts of animals in the name of saving animals. Oh wait. After narrowly escaping a gene splicing experiment, Weasel Spanx and Rabbit Redman find themselves on a revenge quest against the evil Genron Corporation. Think of these guys as your run-of-the-mill practitioners of sinister science. They are big on animal abuse, and after years of getting away with all of it, the day of reckoning has finally arrived. Turns out there's an entire rebellion that's been brewing for some time, and it's up to our two fuzzy troublemakers to lead the charge, mostly by breaking a lot of shit. Spanxy Boy is about as 3D platformer as any 3D platformer ever 3D platformered. He's not only a single, but also double jump that's used for most of the game, plus a spinning hover and grapple courtesy of Redmond. I'd say the platforming isn't too bad, but it's also never really clever. Imagine in your mind a game that just sorta plops hazard-laden jumps all over the place because it can. Congratulations! You've officially reached the level of game design that was implemented here. Little dude can also scamper around on all fours, which gives him a nice sprint, but more than that lets you cling to all matter of rails. This is super handy when it comes to zipping around pipes, and might actually be the most fun mechanic here, what with how chaotic it can get. These types of games are always at their best when they lean into something only the main character can do, like Rayman with his flying fists, and Spyro with his flying body. Overall, I'd say the controls feel good despite a few moments of jank, and you know what?
Whiplash really makes you feel like a weasel.
While you only ever control Spanx, you do technically command Redmond as well, given that he's treated as an unwitting weapon. You can dispatch enemies with a flurry of quick strikes, an overhead smash, and even a 360 ground sweep, with clever combos racking up a meter that lets you go all sorts of crazy. The combat is what any sensible person might call obnoxious. You're often going up against multiple baddies, all of which not only have sizable health bars, but also expert fighting skills. Trained by, I can only guess, Batman himself, they hit hard and block just about everything, leaving you to either whittle them down or get bored and leave. Unfortunately, these guys are the primary means of amassing snacks, which, in addition to refilling your health, double as XP that buffs the two furballs. However, they are not the only means of leveling the playing field, as scattered around the facility are explosive robo-mice, as well as machines that imbue our heroes with the power of lightning, fire, and straight-up toxic goop, to name a few. Being able to freeze your foes is a pretty handy tool, but more so are these used for puzzle solving, like turning your bunny buddy into a balloon. In fact, this poor little guy is subject to a great many ordeals throughout this game, most of which have to do with unlocking doors thanks to this tug-of-war mechanic. And the worst part? He's left totally heartbroken. But he ain't the only one suffering, as there are animals galore to liberate from the clutches of greed. Aside from the platforming and fighting, the majority of this game is spent destroying whatever you see, with a nice real-time total of Genron's net worth displayed. The more you wreck, the more it plummets, going all the way from high 7 figures to a fat sum of nothing. And I do mean whatever you see. speakers, computers, glass panes, even plants. This, along with freed animals, factors into what the game calls boons, which are essentially interlevel bonuses that grant you new fighting abilities and a few other things like downloadable level maps, which prove invaluable as, would you believe it, Shinron's goddamn ginormous! It's a lot of corridors, sure, but along with them are areas that are nothing short of cavernous with plenty of insta-death pits to fall into. I think the worst are the flame and laser walls that pop up whenever you're dealing with the Vincent conveyor belts, simply because they take forever to go away and, in the case of the latter, require you to actively reposition yourself for what seems like an eternity. And there's a whole area dedicated to this nonsense. There is a fast travel system, but the points are few and far between, acting as bookends for the various level areas. And I'll admit it, for a corporate hellscape, Shinron's got some pretty dynamic theming based around robotic, genetic, and medical-based research. You even get to play around in the garbage for a little bit, by which of course I mean braving heaps upon heaps of waste and outrunning toxic sludge that fills entire rooms. And I suppose I'd enjoy it a bit more if A, it wasn't so easy to get turned around thanks to the samey design, and B, the entire second half of the game wasn't dedicated to re-exploring areas you've already combed through. I wish I was making it up, but yeah, at about the halfway point, it turns into an egg hunt with you tracking down higher-ups for their security keys. This is where the game really starts to wear on ya. You know, getting to the point where for the past 5 or so hours you've done the same thing over and over, and it's all starting to set in that it's all a bit more frustrating than it is fun. If there's one truly unforgivable sin that befalls Whiplash, it's that it's mediocre. Painfully mediocre. The combat's clunky, the platforming is often redundant, it's got more filler than an anime, and what's often cited as its saving grace, being the dark humor, really isn't that edgy or comedic. It's got a few zingers, I suppose, but it never progresses past the realm of 7th grade lol funny 'cause random. I think the best bit is that, for whatever reason, film director and criminal Roman Polanski not only works at Shinron, but Redmond has it out for him. And I can't say I blame him. Dude's a creep. Anyway, I will admit that the music's pretty good with a big focus on industrial sounds, but if there's one thing I'm a real sucker for, it's dynamic tracks that change to fit with what's happening in the moment. And Whiplash has this in spades, with button inputs themselves affecting the flow of things. The crazier you get, the crazier it gets, working perfectly with that frenzy mechanic I mentioned earlier. I also can't knock its premise. This is probably the only game brave enough to even entertain the ideas it touches on, and I can't think of any other that lets you not only electrify, but also freeze and set a bunny on fire before using it to attack people. Not saying I want to do any of those things, but if my cold heart ever so desired, I could just boot up Whiplash for 5 minutes, then go about my day with nobody else the wiser. I'm pretty sure that's what a few of those groups like the RSPCA were worried about, but I want to make it perfectly clear that my intentions are not about hurting animals, just other people, and that's nowhere near as controversial. Okay, I'll stop now. I guess you could say I have a love-hate relationship with this game. I've got a lot of nostalgia for it despite only ever playing the demo, though that's never been quite enough to cloud my judgment. But from what I can tell, it has a huge cult fan base, which is totally understandable. This is just another 3D platformer in the long line of oft-overlooked 6th gen entries that was just original enough to stand on its own hind legs, but not nearly enough to blaze any new trails. And it couldn't have helped that 2003 was such a packed year for the genre, with games like Rayman 3, Ratchet & Clank 2, Jak 2, Vex, iNinja, Billy Hatcher, Wario World, Voodoo Vince, Sonic Heroes, and Battle for Bikini Bottom. And that isn't even the entire list! And hey, while I'm not the biggest fan of this game's writing, the constant push-pull dynamic between Spanx and Redmond is something I enjoy. On one hand, you've got a heroic, sometimes reckless character who acts without any real thought, and on the other, a nervous voice of reason who can't escape treatment as a punching bag. Sometimes the oldest tropes are the best, and there's no mistaking this game for a buddy platformer. Kinda funny, isn't it? How Spanx and Banjo are similar yet polar opposites. Both debuted in racing games, but whereas one treats his best friend with care, the other keeps trying to kill his. Maybe this game's way deeper than I've given it credit for, with two heroes trying to save those who are hurting but unable to escape the cycle themselves? Nah, that's bullshit. Truth is, I ran out of things to talk about a while ago, so I thought I'd inject some video essay crap into the mix. Did I do good? Was I pretentious? I mean, artsy and insightful enough? But do you like games that are impossible to complete? Have you ever played Dr. Muto and thought to yourself, gee, I wish I could find more stuff that denies you the satisfaction of collecting everything? Well, look no further than Whiplash. Not only does freeing animals and running down all of Jinron's cash go towards getting 100%, but so too do the Robo-Mice. I'm not even gonna go in on how odd it is that weapon pickups are considered MacGuffins, because the real problem is that you can't even collect them all thanks to glitches. The highest rating you can get is 95%, which is crazy because the highest rating this game ever got was 72%. I can't imagine that the bonus is anything too special, but the possibility that nobody, and I mean nobody, has ever even laid eyes upon it blows my mind. Then again, I'm not even sure if one exists. The Prima Strategy Guide is readily available on the internet, and while it remarks that there are those who beat Whiplash and those who conquer it, there's no mention of any completion bonus. And this guide is way thorough. It lays out everything there is to know, including Spanx and Redmond's star signs for whatever reason. So until someone finds it within themselves to somehow conquer the bugs, we're just gonna have to accept that any effort made is futile. But credit where credit is due, Crystal Dynamics knocked it out of the park. Not only did they make a game that revealed the hypocrisy of PETA, but an aptly named one at that. Because I played Whiplash, and now I have brain damage.